Hey guys, I'm James Lucan, and I'll be doing the video for our discussion this week. And I'm talking about deception prediction across media, and there are three theories that go with that. The first theory is called social distance theory. It states that the greater the distance between two people, the greater the chance that deception will take place in that conversation. Distance in this case mainly refers to technological distance rather than physical distance. So according to this theory, people are most likely to lie over an email than over something like instant messaging, such as like texting or Facebook Messenger, then less likely to lie when speaking over the telephone, and finally are least likely to lie in face-to-face communication. So the order for that is email, messaging, phone calls, face-to-face interactions. Most likely to experience deceit, least likely to experience deceit. The second theory is called media richness theory, which sounds kind of interesting, kind of confusing. It states that the likelihood of a person lying directly correlates to how rich the media is that they are using. And that didn't really make sense to me at first, but Professor Toma did a good job of explaining it in the online lesson. And it's best thought of as the opposite of the first theory. So instead of email being the most likely to be deceitful, it's now face-to-face communication being most likely to be deceitful. And that's because in face-to-face communication, there's so many variables, so many like stimuli that are being experienced, that there are so many different opportunities to be deceitful. Whereas with email, on the other side of the spectrum, you're really only doing one thing. You're typing words, and the idea is that it's harder to be deceitful when that's all that you're doing. So now, instead of the order being email, messaging, phone calls, face-to-face, it's now, with the second theory, it's now face-to-face, phone calls, messaging, and then email. And so, like I said, it's an exact reversal, and I would recommend checking out the lesson because it does a much better job of explaining it. The third theory is called the features-based approach, which is even more complex. It just sounds weird. And it takes the four aforementioned mediums of communication, the email, the instant messaging, the phone calls, and then the face-to-face talking, and assesses them based on three criteria: their synchronicity, their recordability, and their distribution. I'll explain those in a little bit. Communication mediums that have high levels of all three of those are most likely to facilitate deception, and communication mediums that have low levels of all three of those filters, we'll call them, are least likely to facilitate deception. Synchronicity means how much the interaction is happening in real time. Recordability refers to how easy it is to track the conversation, so how easy it is to produce like a digital receipt of the interaction. And distribution, which is a terrible word choice for its definition, refers to how physically close the two people in the interaction are. After filtering the four aforementioned mediums of communication through these three filters, it was concluded that phone calls are the most likely to facilitate deception, followed by face-to-face and instant messaging being equally likely to facilitate deception. So face-to-face and instant messaging are now one and the same. And then the least likely to facilitate deception is now email. All three of those theories are saying different things, but the third theory is regarded as the most accurate theory, ordering the four mediums of communication in the most correct order. But however, I disagree with this. In my personal experiences, I've found that theory one is the most accurate of the theories. And this is because I've found it most easy to be deceitful over just a keyboard rather than talking to someone face to face. There are so many more things that need to go correctly during a face-to-face interaction in order to successfully lie to someone than there are when you're just typing over a keyboard. There's literally just one thing that you have to do. You have to type the lie when you're over a keyboard. Whereas with face-to-face interaction, you have to make sure that your vocal intonations are on point, that you're not that you have like good body language, and facial expressions are not misleading. A personal example of this is if my mom texts me on a weekend and asks like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing? What are you up to?" and I'm at a bar or something, and I don't want her to really know about that, or I don't want to like get into what I'm doing. I'll just say, "Oh, I'm sitting on the couch," or like I'm hanging out, doing nothing, which is a lie. And it's really easy to just type that. But if I'm home for the weekend and my mom starts asking me in general, like, what do I do on the weekends? It's a lot harder to say, oh, I don't really do anything. It's harder to facilitate or it's harder to drop a lie about what I do on the weekends when if I'm just like trying to please her. It's harder to hide my, if I'm like going out to bars a lot, like that's harder to hide. So I have two questions for you guys. Number one is, which theory do you find most applicable to your lives? And number two, has technology like email and texting, has that made lying in person easier or harder? And what I mean by that is people used to only communicate face to face, and I want to know your opinion on whether you think that technology has served as a way to strengthen our face-to-face lying, or if it's weakened our ability to lie in face-to-face interactions.